meters of land. Even the people who were holding more than 100 square meters were given only 65, and land was taken away from them. And they were ready to do it simply because now they would have an ownership, a legal ownership of the land, which is better than illegal but larger piece of land. But this involved a lot of social mobilization, a lot of discussions, a lot of meetings with people, a lot of discussions with their leaders. And whenever we are working with these informal settlements, because we are working with people, we also make sure that they have an active group for discussions, which at that point of time we called Slum Committee, which had 50% female membership and 50% male membership. And we propose that this is the group that will later on be registered formally as an RWA, or Resident Welfare Association. And they would later on, once we exit the site, would take charge of the site, of maintenance, of keeping up the services, of also mediating conflicts, if any. So kind of ensuring the long-term sustainability of the project. If we go to zoom into housing model, I won't go much in detail, but the idea was to not propose just one type of house, but several types of layouts for people because of their different requirements, different necessities. So this is just one type that you're seeing on your screen. We developed total 6 types, and that also underwent different variations when it was finally implemented based on what people wanted. So some people wanted one room in front and one room at back and a courtyard in between. Some people wanted both the rooms on the back and the courtyard in front, and so on. And this is just the 3D model. So even though the program was only for 300 square feet of a house, we made sure that the designing that we are doing with people is incremental. So if people wanted to expand further, they could build on top. So first of all, increasing the density, and second is that providing more housing stock to the city. And we also made sure that people know this. So because in informal settlement or even in formal settlements, we do not build houses at one go. If we have our own land, we basically keep on adding over years and years, and maybe for 10 years, 15 years, we keep on modifying the house. So how do we as planners and designers provide that scope in projects like these? The other thing was, this is a very interesting one. In settlements, the yellow part that you see in the plan is the part for which government was paying money. So whatever money keep on adding over years, that much could be built based on their guidelines, market rates, and so how do we as planners? But because we were doing participatory processes and people were projects like these, buying. The other thing was material together instead of relying on contractors. Some of them were yellow part that you see in the sense is the part this kind of which government was made sure that they save some money on adding profit that much could be built based on this. They saved it with the community, with the slum community. How do we and but this orange part was participatory processes and people were projects like these. And once they realized that they can take decisions about how this instead of relying on contractors, come and yellow part that you see in the census is the part this kind of government has made sure that they save some money. Ownership that much would be built. They kind of started investing in the community. The red part that you see is where they started investing a little more to enhance their house based on the requirement that they have. So this is basically the strength of a participatory process. And so this physical model that you see is an example of two houses, where you see one house on the right hand side has a room in front, while left one does not have, neither does it have any staircase. So these are the various combinations. So even though this looks like one house, it is basically two houses and maybe two brothers who are staying next to each other. And they said, okay, why do we build the same model? I need only one room and you need two rooms. So you build one room, I won't build it. I can invest that money on in the staircase. So maybe they built a staircase and saved more money. Even the boundary wall that you see at the center, that can be removed and you have a bigger courtyard. So these are the options that were given to the people under what we call negotiable and non-negotiables. Non-negotiables were those items that we proposed for safety, structural safety of the house, so that because it's an earthquake-prone area, so you have to follow certain guidelines, design and planning guidelines. So you have to follow that. So those were non-negotiables, but negotiables were whether they want to build a boundary wall or not, whether they want window here or there, what kind of doors they want. So these were what people were deciding themselves. And uh, uh, before we even began construction, there was a lot of discussion with people, with 3D models, with 3Ds, with site layouts, 1:1 layouts, where people understood how big their room is going to be. And along with people, we also had a lot of discussions with government agencies, local and state, trying to explain to them that, okay, you cannot have a rubber stamp model, you will have to do this, and this is still validated because we'll make sure that this is safe and secure. And then a lot of facilitation workshop with people, with artisans, with masons, where they gave us a lot of feedback. So bottom picture, you'll see that one of the persons is picking it up and he's telling, okay, this wall is here, but maybe it would have been better if this wall would have been here. So that kind of discussions happened. We got a lot of feedback from that, and then kind of incorporated it back to our proposal. And after that, this is how the construction was happening. You can see the construction pictures now, these houses. So some people said, okay, no, you'll see that staircase. There are two staircases here. So even though we told them that you don't need two, you can have one. But some families were like, no, we need two. And they invested their own money to build that. These are the finished houses picture. So in this, you'll see this. These are the two houses, and one of them does not have a staircase, while the other one has. And they have also not built the central boundary wall, which means they have a bigger courtyard. The family is shared. And this is the basic idea of Indian communities where there's a lot of reliance on common spaces and commons in general. And these are more pictures of the completed houses. And you'll also see many here that, like the tiles that you see on the floor, this was not part of the plan that government approved, but people invested because they started really, exercising their ownership on this house. So, if there are any questions, I don't know, are there any questions? Uh, okay, I'll just continue.
Uh, Hello.
Yeah,
Hi, I am Ahana from School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi. So I have a question. So while this was being made, the construction, so where were the people accommodated, like the transit camp, or what was the approach?
yeah. So that's a very good question. Uh, Here, people already had relatives in other settlements. So for 18 months, 2 years, whenever for the time the construction was going on, they moved to their relatives' place. And this was something that they decided as a the committee that was constituted, they decided how to arrange this.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, Radhika, you want to ask a question? Sandeep.
So, Ashutosh this side from IST Shivpur. So, I had a question that for Ramdev Nagar slum redevelopment project, you showed us the before and after scenario,
Yeah.
that the site planning and all.
Yeah.
Since what we have seen in the site that you have given us, most of the houses, unlike other slum areas that we see in West Bengal, I'm specifically focusing on West Bengal since what we have seen in West Bengal, we see tile roof and other things. So
Hmm.
these semi-pakka character. So what we have seen in the woods, the site that you have provided, those are basically pakka structures. Those are having, and those are mostly not that sporadic. They are mostly having some plant character to it.
Hmm. You mean
Some character to it.
the site that we have given for
Yeah,
the
Juni Rawal
okay.
Wadi.
Yeah.
So, as the previous one question that what will be the way forward to um, that transitional shelter and all. So, sir, can you give us any idea about uh, the Ramdev Nagar project, keeping in mind the Ramdev Nagar project, how it proceeded, how the phasing was done? Since we are talking about a lot of people, involving a lot of stakeholders. So how it phased?
Yeah. Okay. So the next part that I'll present, you'll get some answer. But essentially, if there's a good house with good walls, good roof, it's better to retain it and plan around that instead of demolishing it and doing something new. In Juni Rawalwadi, even though on satellite image it might look like that, but many of the houses don't have, first of all, RCC slab. And the second thing, it would be good if you also look up the DP plan, Bhuj development plan. You'll see that there's a major road going in between. So
Yeah, yes.
even if these are pakka houses in between, the government is going to demolish them, right?
Okay.
So then that's the challenge. That's what you have to work with.
So normally, when we are talking about slum, we are talking about existing like basic services for urban poor. We focus on reinventing or rejuvenating those existing basic infrastructure that is already there.
Yeah,
But since we are talking about Juni Rawalwadi, we don't have much idea about the entire scenario. How the since constructing a newer drain is always costlier than renewing an older drain and then um, developing on
yeah,
the existing infrastructure that is already there. So it might affect the costing in future.
yeah. That's correct. Uh, but like I said, for this program, you have very short time, so you'll have to think at conceptual levels. Uh, Often these sewage lines are not changed in these pockets, but because there's a road coming in and you have a new planning that might come in where you have to dig foundations, so you will have to lay the sewage again. And if you are laying it again, then you have to do it in a better manner.
So, sir, are you suggesting to us to go for directly for a vandalistic approach, which is not advisable or not appreciated in a national context? That we are completely removed since it has become a more of a architecture project rather than a planning project. So, are we going to completely remove the entire built fabric and then suggest something new in place
No,
of
no,
it?
I'm not suggesting anything. It's up to you to decide how do you want to go ahead with it.
Okay.
Yeah, because see, the like I said, you have probably 10 days to work on it, and we take 10 years to work on these things.
Yes.
So based on that, whatever best approach you think there is, you can go with that.
Okay, sir. Thanks a lot.
Sir, I have a
Okay.
doubt.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'm Gayatri Suresh from School of Architecture and Planning, Anna University. So, from the case study you've shown us, have you concentrated on the economic aspects, as in the occupational aspects? Have you considered what kind of occupations they pursue in that specific slum settlement, quarter settlement, and directly translated it in the design process as well? Like,
Yeah.
do they have some kind of artisan work or some kind of occupational provisions also given in the site plan itself?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, and that's a very important thing that you'll have to do. Uh, all these, the case study that I presented, most of them were working on construction sites. So they were masons, they were plumbers, they were electricians. So we kind of developed a system where they could participate in construction of their own house instead of a third party or a contractor coming in and building it for them. They could participate in it. Other sites, you have examples where you might have welders, uh, a welding community. So you can work with them, develop details for them, or for a model or policy model where they can participate in construction, and that kind of empowers them to maybe take more business otherwhere in the city or different
Yes.
artisanal expertise.
Yes. So if that's the case, can we understand Juni Rahulwadi site and what kind of occupation would they pursue?
Yeah.
Because we have zero information.
So I suggest something for Juni Rawalwadi. Like I said, it has you have very short time. So just maybe Tushar can help in that. Just collect a list of questions for Juni Rawalwadi and just share it with me of what information you want, and then I can
Sure,
respond
sir.
as yeah. So
Sure.
including
Yes.
like if you want to ask about what community they are, what artisanal skills they have, what services the site has. So whatever you need to help you work on that site, just just share that with NOSPlan and they can share it with me and I'll respond. Okay,
Thank
Good
Puneet,
evening,
you
sir.
have. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sir, I am Puneet Patnaik from XIM University, Bhubaneswar. My question for you is what are the phases in which the construction or development of the slum took place, and what steps have been taken after the construction? How the maintenance and all those things will be taken care of the buildings in the slum?
Okay. So the construction phasing was done in a manner that families who already had some option for transit shelter, they moved first and they built their house. They cleared their space, they moved their kacha houses, they recovered whatever material there was and built their own cluster and they moved it. And then the next family started working. So this is how it started, this is how it was done. Then once the houses were constructed, they started, the Nagarpalika, the municipality floated a tender for infrastructure and that work began. So this is how the main phasing was done in this case study.
Okay, sir. So because in Jaga Mission,
If there is something that you are thinking about the materials that should be used to cut the cost of the construction.
Okay, you can list this question in the list of questions that you will send of the locally available material in Bhuj, so that I can give you a list. Okay.
Fine, sir. Thank you.
Then we have Balaji Purani.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir. So this is Purni from School of Planning and Architecture, Vijayawada. So I have one question because Bhuj is prone to earthquake and all. What kind of structural measures that was taken in specifically this Ramnagar project
Hmm.
for the
So
housing and for the infrastructure services also, sir?
okay, so for that, I think you can go to our website, hunnarshala.org, in the guidelines that we followed. These are GSDMA guidelines, Gujarat State Disaster Management Authority guidelines, which was prepared after the earthquake. So this includes for load-bearing structure, it includes vertical bars, bands, and so on. And there are very specific guidelines. So I suggest all of you just go through that because if you're proposing anything architectural, you'll have to follow that. Okay, Sandeep.
Sir, Ashutosh again. Sir, from IS Shipur. Sir, what was the minimum gestation period for this phasing? So, since creating a housing stock is also a time-consuming process, so the
See, one cluster took about 18 months. So, and you can then keep on overlapping this. So, a cluster might have 4 houses, 8 houses, but because the construction began together, it would take about 18 months to finish.
So, sir, for each clusters, the services, where the services, since normally the practice is the services is all, during plotting, the services are basically completed in a completion, the overall site. Then the plotting, the clustering is done. So, what was the way forward to
See,
this?
that process, what you're talking about, is a very urban middle income way of approaching housing. In a site like this, where you don't know which people will get ready to construct and when, uh, the better idea is to create the access ways, but the main services are plugged in later. This is also to protect the services from damage later on once you're constructing the house. So that's how we did it. Once the cluster was done, a service line was plugged into it, and so on. Instead of the mainstream way of doing it, where all the services are laid and then the plots are sold, you don't know who's buying it, and then services, then they just build their house later on. And here, because community was building the house together at one go, everyone in the slum committee decided, okay, let's build the houses first and we'll start plugging in infrastructure as the clusters start developing. And this is how all the cities are actually built, which someone else had used this term, auto built house cities. So, incremental way. Nothing is set at first go.
Aditya sir, is there any PPT remaining from your presentation?
There is. Should I finish that first?
Yes, sir. No more questions, I think. You should finish your PPT first. We will send you questions afterwards.
Sir,
NOSPlan.
there is one question from my side. Like myself, Gulshan from MP.
So just this is last question, okay? And after this, we will not take questions, okay?
Okay.
Okay, okay, Guru.
Sir, as we have discussed, as a planner, we never deal with the individual houses, but we always talk about the bulk part. So, as I have seen in the previous presentation, that you got in a detailed manner, like individual houses, etc. So, we should deal with the proposals part, or else we should come up with the financing, like, which comes under the DPR.
Hmm. So I couldn't hear you properly, but what I understood is you're talking about how the financials are working.
Sir, I have texted it in the group chat. So, can you please go through the question?
Okay, that I think Tushar is suggesting that we take a look at that later. So I'll just finish my presentation and get back to you, Guna. Okay.
Yes, sir. That will be great.
ठीक है. So I'll quickly run through the other thing that I mentioned initially on how to manage the land. And some of you also asked whether we break everything and build everything from scratch or not. So this is just an example site plan. This is one of the relocation sites that we worked with, and this was the initial plan. This is actually post-earthquake camping that was done, and later on it got converted as an informal settlement. Here we used three kinds of housing layouts based on various local acceptance of typologies. So type A is something where, and this is all very academic right now. So type A is where you build G+1. So one room on ground floor, one room on top. Type B is where you build two rooms, but the plot is a little wider, and the length is about 13 meters. In type C, the length decreases to about 10 meters, and plot that is slightly narrower but shared spaces between two houses, which becomes type C. So this was basically an area management exercise that we did. How do we manage plots or lands? Is a rectangular plot more efficient, or is a squarish plot more efficient in context of Bhuj? And then we put all of them in the same site layout and saw how it can be done. And we saw that in all these layouts, at least 1/4 of the land, 20% to 25% land is being freed, which we can use as a selling point with the government. Let's see, you are actually gaining land in your city. And instead of just demolishing everything, we try to retain what is good in good condition. So the leftmost part is how the pocket, an informal settlement might be. And the central plan that you see is how probably developer would do it, where they will come, erase everything, and build a new layout. But what we suggested and how we have worked in these pockets is that we retained those roads which were good in good condition. We retained those service lines which were in good condition, and we also retained those houses which were pretty good already. So why do we break it and make something new? So on the right hand side that you see is something that becomes a mix of the first two plans, where we are retaining the road layouts, we are retaining the temples or other religious places. There was a mosque in Ramdevnagar. So how do we retain that and then work around that? And that is where our skills are really used. And we realize that even if you retain it, you still develop land, and which is far more usable, because you in the central plan you will see that it's an empty plot of land. You will anyway have to build roads which will consume land. In the right hand side, where the roads are already existing, you don't have to do anything. So this freed land is far more usable, and this is what we did at the city scale. So because we had all the numbers, we had all the land holdings, we kind of put it based on the densities that we wanted, and all the red portions that you see were those pockets where density was higher than required. The yellow or the orange parts were where you had enough land for the amount of families that were there, and the green or dark green were the ones where land was actually being freed. So then you had to, along with in-situ, you also had to plan with the community of certain moving or relocating if they are agreeing. Like some of the land, which is in technical term called untenable, the red ones that are marked in this, where it is just not legal to build. Either it's a forest land, or maybe it falls in a riverbed where it gets flooded all the time. So we'll have to also think at the city level some relocation plans, which is what we did here. And then for the government, we marked these 4 pockets, 5 pockets around the city. Let's see, this is where if you do this program, you will have land for other public infrastructure for the city. And these are basic numbers that we showed. So about 80 hectare of land is what Bhuj would have gotten if it would have developed all the informal settlements. And then PMAY, I just have a look at this guideline also. You will, because this Juni Rawalwadi that you have to work falls under this PMAY program if you want to do it. And there are 4 verticals. And just have a study. I won't go in detail of this, except for the second one, which is credit linked subsidy. All the 3 verticals are applicable for Juni Rawalwadi, but there are different ways to do it. And this is where you'll have to study and see what are the creative ways of accessing the scheme from government. And we went ahead not just in Bhuj, but along across Gujarat. We did planning exercises in 8 cities to see what is feasible. How do we prepare plans for them? We went to people, did a lot of survey of what kind of houses they want, what are their income levels, what the informal settlement itself, how much services they already have, and then we kind of presented it back to local body, created these kind of maps where all the pockets had certain criteria of what community these are slum profiles that we did. That okay, this is a slum pocket which is probably just partially tenable because half of it is on the lake. So then how do you decide what is to be done? Like for Juni Rawalwadi also you have this road coming in, so it is partially tenable. So how do you work with that? And then a list of all the slums, what is the density that we are looking at, and maybe what is the land footprint that is suitable for a city like Bhuj or Rapar or different cities that we worked in. What is the land status? Land ownership becomes very important. Is it government owned land? If it's private land? Is it forest land or central government owned land? Well, that becomes very important. Then we also created something called relocation or proximity map, where if suppose in the worst case scenario we have to replace a community because they are say at the riverbed and they don't have anywhere else to go and they themselves want to move because it gets flooded every rain. So what is the walkable distance so that it does not affect their livelihood options, their transport options? So we took 800 meters based on discussions and then decided who can move where. And again, after relocation, what is the city level data that comes in and which are the slums? So we also created something called priority analysis, which are the slum pockets which should be worked on first. Then, yeah. I'll skip this. These are just the numbers that what, and we created a strategy for the government of working at the city level. Because as students of planning, we realize that you have to look at the larger context and propose things which kind of create systems to you work at the ground level. So you have to learn from bottom up, but have to create a policy that works top down. And then the larger question. So it is not just housing. Government schemes tend to look at housing as something which is very individual, as very infrastructural. So you provide a house, you provide infrastructure, it's done. But that's not housing. And then that kind of raises this question: who does the city belong to? Does it belong to shop owners? Does it belong to people walking on the street? Does it belong to a street vendor? Does it belong to cars or bikes? Does it belong to Nagarpalika employees sweeping the street? Does it belong to people who are selling vegetables? Or does the city belong to these people who are staying in plastic sheet tents for years and they're not getting any space? And why are they staying there, first of all? Why did Juni Rawalwadi came to be an informal settlement in the first place? Or like street vending. like I said, housing, we have to look at housing at not just housing, but also looking, like one of you asked about livelihood. So many of these slum pockets in Bhuj have street vendors as the main earning member in families. So can we do something for that and make that part of that urban exercise or housing exercise? So we work with street vendors. We have built street vending zones with the government. We have mapped different streets of how many vendors are there, which informal pockets are they coming from, and this is just an example. Uh, so it is all about working with the commons instead of working with individual households. You have to look at the collective, and this is how humankind has been building. So this is a photo from Bhutan, where people from different communities come together and build a school for everyone. uh, Children are participating, women are participating, and half of the time there's no financial transaction at all. So can we use this social capital with while proposing something for our slums? And they will have songs for different stages of construction. So foundation will have a song, lintel will have a song, roof will have a song. So that energy, how do we, instead of coming from outside as an outsider, and because of our high handedness and uh, thinking that, oh, we are planners or we are architects, we know everything, and destroy the social capital, how, instead of that, how do we rely on that? And a lot of these houses, a lot of these settlements never had planners or engineers or architects. They were just people who lived to these places. So how do we learn from these, even in the urban context? This is North Gujarat, similar kind of construction, and not just houses. This is digging of well. And Aabhat is basically this. In North Kutch, the activity of coming together and helping a family build a well or build a house is called Aabhat. And people come together. No one is paid as such. There's no financial transaction, but there's a feeling of helping each other. There's a feeling of camaraderie between each other, and that is how they do this work. And then village has a new source of water, uh, and animals also kind of respect that. So this is all made of mud, and still animals are very careful to not destroy it. And in the end, there's a celebration. So everyone comes together and eat. And this is something that probably, except for the current capital oriented Western civilization, most of the other civilizations still are driven by the idea of commons, idea of togetherness. And as planners, how do we rely on that? How do we make things human for people? How do we work as a collective instead of individual? And I think this is where I'll end my presentation. These are the 4 points that I will give to you as takeaway, and you have to think on how to really use it in your work. First is collective. Instead of looking the housing as a structure, how do you look at it as an act of housing, as something which is done over a period of time, and as a collective, not individuals coming and building their own house and forgetting who lives next to you. And how do you rely on these commons? Like all of these communities, especially in informal settlements in cities, they have some social capital with them. So just look up, what does social capital mean? What is your social capital where you are in your community? And how do you reflect that in your policy or the planning that you're doing? And the third thing that you have to realize is that a lot of these urban settlements, especially these informal settlements, are driven by livelihood opportunities. So it's basically labor that is driving them. So having considering that, and then you have to realize or think of, as planners, what is your role? Is it to just make beautiful plans, or do you have a role as a facilitator? How do you work with that? So yeah, I'll end my presentation here. There are further readings. I can share it with NOSPlan, Chitambri or Tushar. Do look up someone called Gautam Bhan. I think I'm suggesting him because he is a very good speaker, and there's a YouTube video also. If you Google Gautam Bhan with Developing Urban Futures Conference, there's a very beautiful talk by him. It's only 12 minutes. Jaga mission, some of you already talked. So update yourself. Has it failed in certain areas or not? What has been the learning? So these are some of the readings that you can do, and I can also share these readings. I've already shared the Judy Rawalwadi plan and everything. So yeah, I'll end here.
Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate that you shared your ideas about various projects in in-situ redevelopment, and I really extend my gratitude to you that you take out your time in your busy schedule to grace the event on the behalf of NOSPlan organization. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, Tushar.
Yeah.
So Tushar,
Sir,
you collect all the questions, or should I answer some right now?
No, sir. You have answered enough question, and if there is more question, they can write it on text box. We will send you after the meeting.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We'll collect all the questions
Yeah.
from the students and then we'll let you know. We'll try to get maximum answers from you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Chitamri and Tushar. Just everyone,
Yes,
just
sir.
send your questions freely, whatever questions you have. I'll try to answer all of them.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Also, thank you, everyone.